Imagine a restaurant menu. 2 burgers, same size, same ingredients, same kitchen. One costs $5. The other costs $120. No gold, no magic sauce, just a different number on the menu. Logic says the $5 burger should win. Same hunger, same function. Food is food. But watch what actually happens. The expensive burger becomes the attraction. People take photos. They don't talk about taste, they talk about price. Now imagine the restaurant lowers the price from $120 to $15. Same burger, same chef. Suddenly, interest disappears because the value was never in the food, it was in the signal. The price wasn't a cost, it was the feature. High price creates a barrier, and barriers create meaning. Not everyone can cross it, and that exclusivity becomes the product. This is where traditional economics starts to fail. Price is no longer connected to utility. Demand is no longer connected to usefulness. They are connected to status perception. People don't ask, is this worth it? They ask, what does this say about me? The brain translates price into identity. Expensive becomes rare. Rare becomes valuable, even when nothing else changes. And once this switch flips, lowering the price doesn't increase demand, it destroys it. Because for some products, being affordable is the flaw. To understand this behavior, we have to rewind more than 100 years, back to a time of extreme inequality, massive fortunes, public displays of excess. This was the world Thorstein Veblen was watching. At that time, economists believed something simple. They believed humans were logical, rational, efficiency-driven. You buy things because they solve problems. Clothes for warmth, tools for work, transportation to move. But Veblen noticed something strange. People weren't optimizing usefulness. They were actively avoiding it. He saw objects designed to be inefficient on purpose. Silver utensils so heavy they were impractical. Clothes so restrictive they limited movement. Homes with rooms no one ever used. These things made no functional sense, and that was the point. Veblen realized something uncomfortable. Usefulness wasn't the signal. Waste was. If you can afford to waste money, time, and comfort, you're signaling abundance. Only someone with excess resources can afford inefficiency. So he introduced a concept that explained everything he was seeing. Conspicuous consumption. Not buying to use, buying to be seen. In a layered society, status is invisible. You can't see someone's bank balance. You can't see their assets. So people need shortcuts, public signals, loud ones. Signals that say, I have so much, I can afford to burn it. The more useless the object, the stronger the signal. Because usefulness helps everyone, waste separates you from everyone else. This flips traditional economics on its head. The product isn't valuable despite being inefficient. It's valuable because it is. And once status becomes the goal, price stops being a barrier. It becomes the proof. This is why luxury doesn't advertise practicality. It advertises difficulty, waiting lists, scarcity, inaccessibility. Because if everyone can have it, it can't signal anything. And this instinct didn't disappear with time. It evolved. Today, the objects are different, but the behavior is identical. Think about what that signal actually means. Not accuracy, not craftsmanship, not usefulness. It's a broadcast, a public announcement that says, I can waste resources without consequences. In evolutionary terms, this is not new. In early tribes, survival depended on resources: food, shelter, protection. Those who had excess needed a way to prove it, not privately, publicly, because hidden wealth doesn't change your position in the group. Visible waste does. So the object itself becomes secondary. What matters is how inefficient it is. A watch that tells time perfectly, but costs almost nothing, can't send that message. But a watch that performs the same task while destroying a large amount of money, that's impossible to fake. This is the key mechanism. In normal markets, price is friction. It's the resistance between you and the product. The goal is always to reduce it. But in a status-driven market, friction is the feature. High price filters people out, and that filter is what creates meaning. Lower the price and you don't increase access, you destroy the signal. Because status only works when it excludes. The moment too many people cross the barrier stops working. That's why accessibility is toxic to luxury. Efficiency is dangerous. Optimization is lethal. If a symbol of status becomes easy to obtain, it stops being a symbol. It becomes just another object. And this creates a strange dependency. Luxury brands don't compete on quality improvements. They compete on distance. Distance from affordability, distance from normal income, distance from average lives. The product doesn't need to be better. It needs to be harder to justify. Which is why the worst thing that can happen to a status object is not a cheaper competitor, but a cheaper version of itself. Once the signal collapses, the demand collapses with it. And this is where the paradox fully forms. Price stops being a sacrifice. It becomes the reason for buying.
Once exclusion becomes the source of value, everything flips. Quality stops being the anchor. Function stops mattering. Difficulty becomes the asset. The harder something is to obtain, the more meaningful it feels. Not because it's useful, but because it filters people out. This creates a strange loop. Higher price, fewer buyers. Fewer buyers, stronger signal. Stronger signal, higher desire. So, demand no longer reacts to price normally. It mirrors it. As the price rises, the desire rises with it. Not for everyone, only for the people who want to be seen crossing the barrier. This is where the curve inverts. In a regular market, price pushes people away. Here, price pulls a very specific group closer. And the object becomes almost irrelevant. You're not buying metal, you're not buying leather, you're not buying engineering. You're buying membership. A silent membership, one that doesn't need words. The price speaks for you. Every increase in price strengthens the club. Stronger club, stronger signal. Stronger signal, higher willingness to pay. There is no natural stopping point, because the value is no longer tied to reality. It's tied to perception, and perception compounds. Once people believe something is exclusive, they behave in ways that make it exclusive. Waiting lists form, scarcity becomes permanent, access turns into privilege. At that point, lowering the price isn't a discount, it's an attack on the entire system. Because if the barrier weakens, the signal weakens, and if the signal weakens, the product collapses. This is how prices drift away from usefulness and float upward on psychology alone. And once this loop is established, rational thinking has no leverage.
This is where the paradox turns cruel, because it doesn't hit everyone equally. At the top of the pyramid, status spending is harmless. When someone with vast surplus buys something absurdly expensive, nothing breaks. No plans change, no future is delayed, no compounding is interrupted. The money used was excess. It wasn't doing any work anyway. But the signal doesn't stay at the top. It flows downward. People below see the behavior, but they don't see the balance sheets behind it. They see the car, the watch, the lifestyle, and they assume the behavior is the cause of the wealth, not the result. So they copy it, not with surplus, but with sacrifice. This is the imitation Veblen described. Status doesn't just separate classes, it pulls the lower ones into imitation. You don't buy to enjoy, you buy to avoid falling behind. Because in a visible society, looking unsuccessful feels dangerous. It feels like exclusion. So spending becomes defensive, not aspirational. You don't ask, can I afford this comfortably? You ask, what will it say if I don't? And this is where the math turns against you. The same purchase that is harmless at the top is destructive in the middle. For the middle class, money has a job. It needs to grow, it needs time, it needs consistency. Every dollar diverted to appearance is a dollar removed from compounding. But the object you buy doesn't compound, it decays. Cars lose value, phones age out, fashion expires. So you're not just spending money, you're swapping a growing asset for a shrinking one, all to send a signal to people who don't know you and won't remember it. This is the core imbalance. The elite spend from excess, the middle class spends from the engine, and the engine is what actually creates wealth.
But under constant social pressure, protecting the engine feels less urgent than protecting the image. So the appearance of success gets financed by slowly dismantling the thing that could have made it real.
This instinct didn't come from money. It came from survival. Long before banks, markets, or currencies, humans lived in groups where rank mattered. Status wasn't cosmetic, it was protection. Higher status meant better access, more food, safer shelter, stronger alliances. If you were seen as valuable to the group, you were protected. If you weren't, you were replaceable. So evolution wired us with a simple rule: be visibly fit, not quietly, not privately, visibly. Nature is full of these signals, costly ones. Signals that are expensive to maintain because cheap signals can be faked. The animal that can survive while carrying a disadvantage is proving strength. The handicap is the message. In humans, the environment changed. The wiring didn't. We no longer display strength through feathers or antlers. We display it through excess. A house larger than necessary. A car more complex than practical. Objects that consume time, money, and attention. These are modern handicaps. They say, I can afford inefficiency. I can survive drag. I have margin. And just like in nature, the cost is what makes the signal credible. Anyone can claim success. Few can afford visible waste. So the brain still reads these cues as fitness indicators, not logically, instinctively. The problem is that biology doesn't understand interest rates. It doesn't understand depreciation. It doesn't understand opportunity cost. It only understands display. So we end up doing something irrational for a rational evolutionary reason. We voluntarily reduce our financial resilience to broadcast strength. We make survival harder to prove we're strong enough to survive. And the signal works, at least socially, which is why it's so hard to resist. Because ignoring status cues feels like social risk. And the brain is designed to avoid social risk, even at the expense of long-term security.
In the modern economy, this instinct isn't accidental. It's studied, measured, refined, engineered. Marketing doesn't create desire, it aims it. Luxury brands understand that status anxiety is predictable. If you control access, you control meaning. Scarcity doesn't need to be real, it just needs to feel real. Waiting lists, invitations, purchase history requirements. None of these improve the product, they improve the signal. You're not being sold an object, you're being tested. The friction is intentional, the humiliation is part of the process, because effort increases perceived value. If access were simple, the signal would be weak, so access must feel earned. This is how artificial scarcity activates ancient wiring. Your brain doesn't see a handbag, it sees a hierarchy. And once that hierarchy is established, the treadmill starts moving. The moment a symbol spreads downward, it loses its power upward. What once separated becomes common. What once felt elite becomes ordinary. So the top moves again. Higher price, lower volume, more restriction. This keeps the distance intact. The middle stretches to keep up. Budgets bend. Debt fills the gap. But the finish line never gets closer because the signal isn't fixed. It's relative. Status only exists in comparison. So every gain by one group forces escalation by the next. The logo that once meant arrival slowly becomes background noise, not because the object changed, but because the audience did. And this is where the trap tightens. Chasing status requires constant motion. Stopping feels like falling, so consumption becomes maintenance, not joy, not utility, maintenance. You're not buying upward mobility, you're renting relevance, and rent always goes up.
So, how do you escape this loop? Not by winning it, by leaving it. Because real status today isn't what you own, it's what you can walk away from. The ability to say no. No to pressure. No to panic. No to proving anything. Real wealth is quiet. It's the purchases not made,
the upgrades skipped, the money left to compound. When you feel the urge to buy something expensive just to signal, ask one question. If no one could see this, would I still want it? If the answer changes, you're not buying utility, you're buying reassurance. And reassurance is expensive. The strongest signal isn't visible. It's freedom. If you enjoyed this video, please like it to support us. Watching on YouTube? Subscribe to the channel. Watching on Facebook? Follow our page so you never miss our upcoming videos. Until next time, take care.